Carolyn Doobie here. What's the play for today? Well, today I'm playing in an art journal, and I'm starting with a background that I made using a little mini Gelli plate, and I'll have a link down below to that video for you so you can see how I made that paper. But as I'm doing this page had oops, oops, and then not an oops. I was quite surprised. I was expecting an oops, and it didn't happen. I also had a little bit of precious paralysis through this page as I was going. This is the art journal page I made in the recent Let's Play video using a Gelli plate and some pods off of a tree, and it just didn't have enough color for me. So I'm grabbing some Dilutions paints here, and I'm just painting in some of the white areas. You know my need to cover every bit of white space with some color. Now you saw me squirt some water in that Dilutions paint, and that's because the paint's been getting a little bit thicker for me because I'm getting near the end of the container. So if I want it to be a little bit thinner, like for this I wanted it a little more translucent, so I just hit some water in there, and then I'm using stuff that's just a little bit more fluid. Well, at this point I have a problem, and this is a problem that is going to keep coming up throughout this art journal page, and it's the problem of being precious. I really like this pattern, so much so that I was really on the fence if I wanted to just keep it the way it was and just enjoy it as is, or if I wanted to turn it into an art journal page. Well, clearly I picked to turn it into an art journal page, but I'm still kind of having to push through that it's precious kind of thing. Oh, and also too, there's wet paint there, so rather than put my hand in it, I just put a piece of deli paper down. That way, I'm not going to drag my hand through wet paint. Well, anyway, back to the issue of precious. So what I'm doing is sort of journaling my thoughts about it, journaling out a little bit here, just using a fountain pen in some of the white spaces. Now, my hope here was that magically, through this scribble journaling, that I was going to have complete clarity and know exactly what to do next, and yeah, it didn't happen. So I headed over to my stash of rubber stamps, looking for some inspiration there. Well, I grabbed a couple of stamps. I've grabbed 3, actually. One is a Frida, and that's what I'm stamping right here using an archival ink pad, and guess what? It's not as dark as what I want. I want a really dark look. Now my other 2 stamps, one is what I call Venus on the half shell, and the other one is the Mona Lisa. Now just because I grabbed all 3 of them doesn't mean I have to use all 3 of them, and I'm actually only going to use 2 of them in this art journal page. I'm going to put Mona Lisa down here, and she doesn't stamp as darkly as I wanted either. So, end of the world? Nah, I'm just going to call it an oops. And I'm just going to grab some black paint and paint over it because there are some fairly solid areas on her, so I'm just going to kind of paint around. And as I'm doing this, you'll never believe what kind of strikes my mood. I decide maybe I should give Frida a little more body. So I'm just going to keep drawing straight down, and I'm not going to worry about actually giving it any definition. She's not going to have any arms. That's okay. Frida's all good with it. She's going to roll with it. She gets how creativity works. And then I'm going to go in and give her a little bit of darker hair. Well, now another oops strikes. Yes, another outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly. The first one, which was the not-so-dark stamping, which led to the black paint. Well, now the black paint is leading to another oops where I don't really like how the stamping now looks with the black paint, like around their faces and that kind of stuff. So that is an opportunity. So I'm going to grab a Stabilo pencil, and I'm just going to kind of go around some of the lines and darken them up to kind of make things look like they go together. Now this went really well with Frida, but maybe not so well with Mona because some of her details were lost. Again, end of the world? Nah, I'm just going to call it an oops. Somewhere there's an opportunity in it. Don't know what it is at the moment, but it'll show up at some point. Well, now I'm going to start adding some patterns in places, and I grabbed this stencil designed, it's called Hash Marks, and it's designed by Mary Beth Shaw over at StencilGirl Products, and if you're not familiar with StencilGirl Products, she is the original Stencil Girl, the founder of the company, and with this one, I really liked it like that, and it started to feel very precious to me, so I decided I'm going to push it a little bit further, and I'm then going to put it down and stencil it again, and I'm just using that Adirondack, or not Adirondack, it was an archival ink pad, they both start with an A, as I'm doing this. I was having so much fun doing this, I decided I'm just going to put little bits and pieces of it in different places. And yes, it is the continuing quest to cover up the white space on here. I have to admit, again, as I'm doing this, that feeling of preciousness is really creeping in because I'm really happy with how this is going, really liking where it's at. And what that means when I start to feel it's precious is I don't want to ruin it. I don't want to destroy it. And I decide, you know what, I'm just going to be fearless about this, and I am just going to make a choice and put that big old fearless word right on there. I'm going to grab some black paint, pulling it right out of the Dilutions paint, going to take it out of the lid, and I took it right out of the lid. And that was one of the things where sometimes if you do that with a very fluid paint, what happens is you get a lot of paint on your cosmetic sponge. And what that means is there's a good chance paint's going to run underneath it. As soon as I started doing the F in Fearless, I knew that this was going to run under there because I just was using a whole lot of paint here on my stencil called Uplifting Words that I designed for over at StencilGirl Products. Now, I was totally prepared for another oops here because if it runs under it and I can't read it and it looks like a mess, I am just going to call it an outstanding opportunity presenting suddenly. But I was totally surprised it didn't. I was really happy with how it turned out. So I was expecting an oops and didn't get it. But what I did get was some precious paralysis. I was so enjoying it just as it was, I was actually feeling kind of afraid to do anything to it. And when I get that way, I know I just have to do something. So I grabbed that fountain pen from earlier and started doing some scribbled journaling. And at that point, I immediately looked at that and went, no, that's not going to work. That is just way too almost invisible on there. So I needed to grab something that would make bigger, brighter, bolder, darker lines. And for that, I grabbed the Pico Embellisher. And once I got started with it, I just couldn't stop. So I ended up putting journaling on the top of the page, more in the middle, and then even you'll see it work its way all the way up, going from the bottom, touching the very end of Fearless. Well, thanks for joining me for today's play. If you've been enjoying this video, give it a thumbs up. And I'd really appreciate it if you know of somebody that you think would enjoy a little more play in their day if you shared this video with them. Now, what if you want more play? What if you want to know about different ways to let yourself rediscover how to play? Well, that's all over on my blog at acolorfuljourney.com. I've got a free workshop called Permission to Play, a newsletter with downloadable goodies, and of course, the weekly Let's Play videos. Well, thanks so much for letting me be a part of your colorful journey.